Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore. I'm honored to be joined by documentary filmmaker Brian Morrison. Brian, welcome to the Film Threat Podcast.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to have you here. I've seen your film Bastards Road, a documentary about a guy named John Hancock, who's a U.S. Marine who is dealing with PTSD and chooses to deal with his PTSD by visiting his the guys he served with overseas, and does the entire thing walking.
Yeah.
First of all, how did you meet the subject, John Hancock, right?
Yes.
His name is John Hancock.
Yeah.
I'm sure he heard a lot of jokes about that name.
Yeah. I think he's been dealing with it for a little while. Yeah.
But first of all, how did you come to this topic? How did you? I've never seen PTSD and what are people who serve our country, what they deal with. I mean, it's talked about in the news. It's discussed. People are constantly thank you for your service. Yeah. But what they really deal with is what this film really intimately portrays. I've never seen it portrayed in such a way so dramatically.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's we've been at war now almost probably longer than any war in the U.S. history, right? I mean, since we invaded Iraq, I mean, it's just been something that we've all just had to live with,
right.
Is that we are in an active war. I learned about John after he was already popping up on a lot of local TV news specials. Mm-hmm. He was somebody I went to high school with. And so through Facebook and through some mutual friends, I learned about his walk. He'd been walking for 1,500, 2,000 miles at the point that I learned about his walk. So at that point, and oddly enough, like his closest friend growing up was my next door neighbor. Mm-hmm. So I just kind of asked him about John, a little bit more detail than what I'd heard about in these like local news specials. And, I just thought it was crazy that nobody would be documenting this in any, more in-depth way. So he put us in contact with each other, and, it kind of started from there. Like I talked to him first while he was in Louisiana walking. He'd already walked from College Park, Maryland down to Florida, and then had kind of curled back around, the Florida to Louisiana. And, it was the first time I talked to him, and we then thought it would be a good idea for me to come out and visit him.
So what was that like, reconnecting with your high school friend? And this guy, John Hancock, as portrayed in the film, I mean, he's for lack of a better term, he's a shit kicker. I mean, he's a hard partier, hard living, and has dealt with his own demons even before joining the Marines. I mean, this is
John's a very loud personality.
Yes, big personality, I guess.
Very vivacious, very loud.
Likes to drink, likes to have a good time.
Yep.
But in this walk, and how many? So what? It takes about 20 minutes to walk a mile. How many miles did he walk a day?
I think he was averaging around like 25-ish. Some days he would go over 30. Some days, typically, I think we're in the low 20s. Mm-hmm.
Did you walk with him?
So there were days where I would walk a little bit, and then I would get in my rental car, drive a little bit, and then he would reach up, he would catch up with me, and I would just do it again. Mm-hmm. And it was always surprising how quick he would catch up to me after I drive past him, like even a mile sometimes, so I could, pick a good spot and where they had a good background, and soon enough, like he would be there and I wouldn't be ready.
Wow.
But because he moved.
And what was it like when he reconnects with a lot of the guys he served with, and in one of the most moving moments, he connects with them and they discuss the guys that were lost.
Yeah.
And he was in, correct me if I'm wrong, he was in a platoon where 1 out of 4 guys lost their lives.
Yeah. So he was part of the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines. The unit is about roughly like between 1,500 and 1,800 Marines. Mm-hmm. So 1 out of 4 was killed or injured during their deployment to Ramadi in 2004. So it was one of the highest casualty rates in Iraq. Those meetings of those guys was kind of the really eye-opening thing for me and my experience in telling John's story. You know, it was that contrast of being out on the road and being isolated for days and weeks. And then you had these meetings of sometimes he hadn't seen these guys since he got out for 10 years. And it was crazy to see them just pick up where they had just left off. You know, it's like a close friend or a family member you haven't seen in a long time, and you just spark that right up. And seeing that with that level of emotion and that level of I don't know, it was just really moving to see that connection after so long in most cases with him meeting these guys, and how therapeutic it was. I mean, you could just see how much lighter he was, how much more he smiled and laughed, and how much, you know, a lot of crying, but there was also just this relief and release of emotion and tension and stuff. And I just saw it as such a huge healing moment.
That's what I really feel that the film is about, is really about his healing process. And in that, you know, we see this talked about in the news a lot. And one of the things that he complained about, actually some of his fellow Marines also talked about, was the way to solve this is they give everybody a pill. And I kind of feel like a pill might suppress some of these emotions, might like heal in the moment, right? You're being healed in the moment by this pill, but it doesn't, it's not a long-term solution. I feel like we also do this for a lot of things. It's like, here's the pill, let's solve your ADD, let's solve this. We're an over-medicated society, when actually the true path to healing is a long road of actually confronting all of that head on. And
it's easier to quantify,
right?
You know, or that's harder to quantify, right?
Right.
It's talking to somebody and seeing, hey, are you doing better? You know, it's a lot easier to just give somebody a pill and just say, like, okay, he's been given this, you know, now like this result should happen.
Yeah, I feel like we're doing this, you know, on many levels. Just just as a whole in America, we're just totally over medicated, and it's I don't know. I don't think it's helping us. I think that he found his pathway, and I think the pathway to health with anybody it's different for everybody.
Yeah,
it's gonna be different for you, me,
for
John. And his was to walk, and you see how that had a profound walk and talk.
Yeah, right.
Really, that was it.
Yeah. It was crazy to me, because when you're isolated and alone, especially in the realm of like walking alone, isolated, in the way that John did, I mean, there's nothing else except your own thoughts. So it's like he was really challenging himself every day to put himself in those moments that had been, you know, kind of pushed aside, and that trauma that had just never been fully dealt with. And he really just took it head on and attacked it. And then so he's also dealing with those same memories and those same traumas through talking with his brothers and the family and friends of those guys. You know, the good times, the bad times, but really just exposing that trauma and those memories out there. And that's very courageous to me. There
are a couple scenes where John and his fellow Marines talk specifically about what they experienced that was traumatizing. We don't see this, but them just talking about it is really raw. So, what was, I can't imagine what that, they're just seeing their buddies torn to shreds. They talk about a building almost collapsed on them, and they were in one corner where if they weren't in that corner, they would have just been crushed and gruesomely, lost their lives. Like, what was that like to have those conversations?
Yeah. Well, one in particular with Chris McIntosh was really one of my first experiences with Chris. Had not really spoken to anybody professionally about it, and certainly me coming in, not ever meeting him, there was a lot of faith that Chris had to have in me, but more so in John. John and I established a trust and kind of a relationship that we were going to go to those places and talk about those things. And I felt that it was that bond and that loyalty to each other that enabled Chris to kind of take that trust that John had in me, and that kind of transcended over to him and I, where without John, that interview doesn't happen. He's not opening up to me in that way ever. And it's also kind of the way that I worked very isolated, in a way where I didn't have an audio guy. I didn't have an assistant or a cameraman. It was just me, in those moments. And I thought that it would just be so much to have another person kind of enter that trust circle or whatever. I mean, it was very moving, and I just think it was just very brave and, like I said, courageous of Chris and John and all the other guys to just let me in the room.
Yeah. You're basically right in their heads in their own therapy sessions.
Yeah. I mean, they're exposing themselves to the most, terrible memories and traumas that they have. Like like Chris he's just caught in this, in his time in the film, he's just caught in this cycle of thought where he's just trapped in those dark memories where he can't even see the good things that happened over there and the friendship and the loyalty. But it just is he's so wrapped up into the death that it's hard for him to find any lightness.
Now, the movie you'll screen at the SLAMDANCE Film Festival in Park City is John walking to Park City.
Yeah, we've joked about that before. But John will be there.
He will be there.
Yeah.
You're going to drive, though.
Yeah.
It's a little cold.
I think he's driving or flying there.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's good. Well, first of all, I know it's actually, technically speaking, it's harder to get into SLAMDANCE than Sundance. I don't think people understand that they show so few films at Sundance that SLAMDANCE is technically the more difficult festival to get into. And SLAMDANCE is a longtime champion of first-time directors. So tell me, the film, I don't want to give anything away, but the film ends at Camp Pendleton.
Right.
And John gives this speech that, it's incredibly moving. I mean, I don't think that Tom Hanks would have done a better job delivering this amazing speech he does to all of these Marines at Camp Pendleton. What was that like? And just my son's a U.S. Marine, so this film really meant a lot to me. He's not served in combat, but he's been overseas. I don't want to say what exactly, but he's been overseas on missions a couple times. But I've been to Camp Pendleton, and it's an amazing place.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like 60 miles across. It's like its own.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's like its own city, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I've been fortunate enough to be there for various events. I've visited him there. It really is a different culture there.
Yeah.
It's a really sense of community more than anything else. So were there any issues with getting clearances as a doc filmmaker to be able to do all this? What did you have to deal with in that sense?
Yeah, for the end of John's Walk, there were clearances that we had to get and pre-authorize our kind of our presence there as civilians, and then as filmmakers.
I mean, you got to get checked out before you can even get on Camp Pendleton.
Yeah, but they certainly were aware of John's walk at that point. And as you'll see in the film towards the end, that moment, that scene where John does finish is very powerful, and it was on their radar in a big way. And that's also, I think, very encouraging from a standpoint of the military hasn't always accepted these post-war more mental side issues. And I think the culture around that is changing a little bit. And that's very encouraging, that inside the military, there is a greater awareness, an acknowledgement about, I don't even want to say PTSD, but they are acknowledging these challenges coming home, reacclimating into a civilian society in wartime. So, you know, a lot of the statistics that we put out were from a Veterans Affairs report that was released in 2019. There was one that was released in 2017. I think that information being put out there is very encouraging.
Well, clearly this has to be taken more seriously, because one of the things that also struck me, it's early in the film, is when John is talking about how, you know, your day job.
Yeah.
Your day job is you're a badass, and your day job is you gotta kill. You know, you gotta go on these missions, and you gotta take guys out. I mean, then you come back and it's like, okay, that's gone.
Yeah.
Now what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Okay. So now you got to reacclimate, and you're not in the service, and what are you going to do? Work at a Costco? And then it's just like a different, okay, that's a strange thought, but like just a normal job, right? Like, how do you go from that to a normal job? It's this, there's almost has to be some reacclimation. And when you look at what's been reported, the suicide rates amongst, you know, vets that come back, is this clearly has to be taken more seriously. I guess my question is that what's been the reaction to the film, because it did screen at Santa Barbara, now it's coming up to screen at SLAMDANCE, so it's really not fully out, but John's seen it,
right,
yes. And other guys have seen it. What do they think?
Yeah, so we've done early screenings of the film as the film was being put together, and we've had very encouraging reactions from the veteran community, in particular the John's unit, that many guys have seen different iterations of the film. And I think why it's a little bit different is because you've seen so many stories over the years, from like Deer Hunter to American Sniper to different documentaries that kind of present PTSD as this like victimized like kind of thing, where it has unfortunately created a stigmatization for that veterans have PTSD, their lives are fucked up, that they're just they're these sad souls, and that's just not the case. And where I think where this film highlights is, yes, a lot of those guys that experience combat and other issues overseas, like, are coming home with challenges, but there's so much more than that. There are those situations where they're operating at the highest, they're part of the strongest fighting force in the world. You know, they are the tip of the spear. Their amount of responsibility and duty and loyalty are at just this high level. Yes, there is trauma, there is loss of life, and those things are terrible, and the nature of the warfighter taking the enemy's life. But this is a high in some point that will never be reached again, a level of importance to your community that will never again be reached for these guys, and they have to come home with that. So it's not just the trauma, it's that like you said, that the level of strength and importance, and those guys can't forget how strong they are. And I think that's what makes this film great, is because John has been able to display some of the troubles that he had, but also that resolve and that level of commitment and loyalty, those great qualities of strength and virtue that those guys still have. And John puts this on perfect display in his journey and his adventure. And I think it's, you know, people will get that inspiring nature of his story. And that's, I think, more of what all these guys deserve, is, you know, to have a sense of hope and strength, and not you are fucked up and messed up for life, because that is just not true.
Well, I've never seen this subject portrayed so intimately, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really think that John is this, he's the conduit to this whole conversation that I hope that we begin to talk about more, because we see it reported in the news, but it's reported in a way as statistics, right?
Right.
So I'm curious about yourself. Were you a filmmaker before this? I know some doc filmmakers that like, they just become a filmmaker because of a subject they're passionate about. Were you a filmmaker before this topic?
This is my first documentary endeavor. I've been producing film and video kind of more in the corporate commercial landscape, but this was definitely not planned. It was a learning process every step of the way.
Well, see, I love that is like this is not maybe in your wheelhouse initially. I mean, filmmaking is, but like just coming to this because you're so passionate about the subject matter, it comes out in the film. So I encourage all of you to go see it, Bastards Road. Post its SLAMDANCE premiere, I expect that you'll have an opportunity to see it because it's going to get some kind of commercial release. I mean, there's no doubt. Wow. Brian, thank you for talking to us today.
Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.